Imagine this. You've cut contact, walked away, decided to reclaim your power, and just when you're finally starting to feel that freedom, boom, he reaches out. A simple hey, a random meme, maybe even a full-blown I miss you. But why? Is it love, regret, or something far more strategic? See, most people think no contact is about making him miss you, but let's get real. It's also about revealing who he truly is. And that test, ooh, it's coming. Because when you shift, when you break patterns, when you step into your worth, the universe, and yes, even he, will check if you're serious. Ever notice how the moment you start moving forward, something tries to pull you back? That's not an accident. It's a test, a final boss level in the game of self-respect. And if you're not prepared, you'll get caught in the same cycle. But here's where it gets interesting. If you know what's coming, you can pass with flying colors. So, before you even think about replying, let's talk about why he's really testing you, how to flip the script, and most importantly, how to make sure this time you win. You've been holding strong, standing in your power, reclaiming your sense of self. No contact wasn't easy, but you did it. You silenced the noise, stepped away from the push and pull, and finally started breathing in your own energy again. And then, out of nowhere, there it is. A message, a like on an old post, a sudden coincidental run-in, but let's not kid ourselves. This isn't just a message, a like, or a random encounter. It's a test. A calculated move to see if the doors you closed are still unlocked. Because here's what most people don't understand. When you break a pattern, when you shift your energy, when you become something he no longer recognizes, the natural reaction is to push back, to challenge, to test. And that's exactly what's happening here. But the real question is, will you pass? Let's break this down. Why do people test boundaries? It's not just about curiosity, it's about control. It's about validation. It's about checking whether the power dynamic has shifted. See, when you went no contact, you disrupted a rhythm, one that worked in his favor. You stopped responding, stopped feeding into the cycle, stopped giving him access to the parts of you that he once had free reign of. And that, right there, is unsettling. It creates discomfort. So what does he do? He sends out feelers. A message that seems harmless, a question that doesn't really need an answer, a memory thrown your way to stir emotion. And for a moment, your brain goes into overdrive. What does this mean? Is he thinking about me? Does he regret it? But here's the part that many miss. This isn't necessarily about regret. It sure is at it. Yeah, it's about reaction. Think about it. If someone truly wanted to make things right, they wouldn't need to test the waters first. They wouldn't breadcrumb. They wouldn't dangle nostalgia in front of you like bait. They would own up. They would show up. So if that's not what's happening, then what is? It's an experiment, a way to gauge whether you're still emotionally available, whether you'll still engage, whether the door is still cracked open just enough for him to slip back in without having to truly step up. Because if you respond, if you give even an inch of emotional energy, it confirms one thing: the access is still there. Now, this is where things get tricky, because your mind will play tricks on you. You'll feel the pull, the temptation to reply, to engage, to prove something. Maybe it's proving that you don't care anymore. Maybe it's proving that you're stronger. Maybe it's proving that he was wrong about you. But let's pause for a second. Who exactly are you proving this to? Because if you truly didn't care, if you were truly free, would there even be a need to prove anything at all? See, this is what happens when boundaries are tested. You're not just being tested by the person on the outside, you're being tested by the parts of you that still crave validation, still seek closure, still want to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. And that's where most people fall into the trap. They think they're in control. They think they're responding on their terms. But what they're actually doing is playing into the very dynamic they walked away from. Because here's the hard truth: engaging in the test is failing the test. Think about it like this. If someone repeatedly left you out in the cold, ignored your needs, made you feel like you had to fight for their attention, why is it now that they suddenly remember you exist? Is it because they've had a grand epiphany, or is it because your absence has created a void they're trying to fill? And more importantly, why is it your responsibility to ease their discomfort when they had no problem being the source of yours? And this is where you take back your power, because a test only works if you participate. A boundary only gets broken if you allow it, and the minute you recognize what's happening, not just logically, but deeply, emotionally, that's when everything shifts. Because suddenly, you're no longer reacting. You're no longer caught in the web of confusion. You're seeing things for what they truly are. But here's the real kicker. Once you pass the test, once you truly hold your ground, don't be surprised when the tactics escalate. Because when people realize they can't manipulate you the way they used to, they don't just give up. They adapt. They push harder. The messages might get more desperate. The apologies might start rolling in. Maybe even a grand gesture, something so unexpected it makes you second guess everything. Discrimination is often a form of warfare that has absolutely no consequences whatsoever. And the person pushing you further is the one who's betraying you. But before you even consider softening, ask yourself, why now? Why only when you became unavailable did they suddenly remember your worth? Because true respect, true love, true effort, those things don't just show up when someone loses you. They exist in how they treat you when they. So, as you stand at this crossroads, feeling the weight of that message, that call, that unexpected, hey, how have you been? Ask yourself, is this a genuine reconnection or is this just another test? Because the answer to that question will determine whether you're walking forward or walking in circles. You've been silent, you've pulled back, you've reclaimed your space. No more late night texts, no more waiting for replies, no more endless overanalyzing. And just when you start to settle into this newfound peace, there it is, ping, a message, a like on an old post, a sudden how have you been from the same person who once made you feel like you were asking for too much. Strange, isn't it? How someone who once seemed so indifferent suddenly finds the urge to reach out the moment you stop reaching for them. But make no mistake, this isn't about missing you. It's not about regret. It's not about love. It's about something deeper, something far more calculated. It's about validation. Validation is a powerful thing. It fuels egos, restores a sense of control, and reassures people that they still matter. And right now, that's exactly what's happening. Because when you walked away, when you chose silence over seeking, you created a void that wasn't there before. And the thing about people who thrive on external validation, they can't stand a void. They need reassurance that they still have access, that they still hold space in your mind, that they still matter in your world. But let's pause for a second. Why does it even matter to them? If they were the ones who dismissed, ignored, or made you feel like an afterthought, why should your absence make any difference? The answer is simple: control. When someone is used to being the one who decides when the door is open and when it's closed, your decision to shut it on your terms disrupts their sense of power. And that, right there, is where the test begins. It starts subtly, a casual message, a reaction to your story, a harmless just thinking about you that conveniently appears right when you are finally starting to move on. At first it seems small, almost insignificant, but that's the trick. It's not meant to be grand. It's meant to be just enough to make you wonder, to make you feel seen again, to spark that tiny voice in your head that says, maybe they do care after all. But let's be honest, if they truly cared, would you have had to go no contact in the first place? If they truly valued you, would they have let you slip away, only to return when they needed reassurance that you still care? See, this is the part that most people overlook. This isn't about you. This isn't about love. This isn't about making things right. This is about them, about their ego, about their need to confirm that even after everything, they still have some kind of influence over you. And here's where it gets dangerous, because validation seekers don't always play fair. If a simple message doesn't work, they'll escalate. They'll remind you of inside jokes, bring up old memories, use nostalgia as a weapon to pull you back in. And if that doesn't work, maybe even a little self-pity, a subtle mention of how hard things have been, or how they wish they did things differently. But before you start questioning if this means something real, ask yourself, why now? Why only when you became unavailable do they suddenly remember your worth? Why only after losing your energy do they crave your presence? Because here's what's really happening. They're not looking for a relationship. They're looking for reassurance. They want to know that if they ever needed your attention again, they could still have it. That if they ever wanted to come back, the door wouldn't be fully closed. That if they ever felt lonely, you'd still be there to fill the gap. And that right there is the cycle. The endless loop of mixed signals, of hot and cold behavior, of reaching out just enough to keep you emotionally invested, but never enough to truly show up. But here's the catch. They don't even realize they're doing it. For some, this behavior is instinctive. It's a subconscious survival mechanism. The need to know they're still wanted, still admired, still relevant in your world. And if you respond, if you take the bait even in the smallest way, you're feeding that need. You're giving them exactly what they came for. The validation that despite everything, they still hold space in your heart. Sure. So now the real question is, What happens if you don't respond? What happens when you don't give them the reassurance they're seeking? That's when things get interesting, because validation seekers don't handle rejection well. They'll double down. They'll find new ways to grab your attention, and when they realize they can't get the response they want, that's when their true colors show. Maybe they disappear again. Maybe they lash out, suddenly accusing you of being cold, distant, uncaring, or maybe they make a dramatic exit, pretending they never cared in the first place. But make no mistake, this reaction isn't about you. It's about their inability to handle the very thing they once made you feel unseen. And that right there is where your power lies, because this time you see it. You recognize the pattern. You understand that this isn't about love or regret or a genuine desire to make things right. This is about a test to see if they can still pull you back in, a test to see if you still need them as much as they need your validation. And the only way to pass is to recognize that the only validation that truly matters is your own. You've gone quiet. You've stopped chasing. You've finally taken back your energy, and for the first time in a long time, you're no longer trapped in the exhausting cycle of waiting, wondering, questioning. And then, just when you think you've turned a corner, there it is, a message, a sudden accidental call, a friend casually mentioning that someone's been asking about you. And in that moment, it feels like the universe is playing some kind of cruel joke. After all this time, after all this effort to detach, why now? Why does the silence that once felt like a dead end suddenly feel like a magnet pulling them back? But the truth is simple. It's not love. It's not regret. It's not some cosmic realization that they can't live without you. It's fear. The fear of losing control. Control is a funny thing. Most people don't even realize how much they crave it until they feel it slipping away. As long as they believed you were still emotionally tied to them, as long as they assumed that a simple message, a breadcrumb, or a well-placed memory could bring you right back, there was no urgency, no reason to act. Because in their mind, they held the power. They controlled the rhythm. They decided when to engage, when to pull away, when to give just enough to keep you invested, and you played along until you didn't. Until one day you stopped responding, stopped reaching, stopped reacting, and that's when the shift happened. Because control is only satisfying when there's someone to control. Power only feels real when there's an emotional response to feed off. But when that response disappears, when the game no longer works, that's when panic sets in. And make no mistake, this isn't just about losing you. This is about losing the certainty, the predictability, the comfort of knowing they could always come back and you'd still be there. Because now they don't know. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know how you feel. They don't know if the door they once walked in and out of so freely has finally closed for good. And that uncertainty, it's terrifying. So, what do? They test, they prod, they send out signals waiting to see if you'll react. A message that says nothing but is designed to make you feel something. A sudden reminder of a memory, meant to stir up old emotions. Maybe even a subtle guilt trip, disguised as a casual check-in. But let's be honest, this isn't about reconnecting. This isn't about making things right. This is about reassurance. They need to know that they still have influence, that they still hold space in your mind, that they still matter. If not to your heart, then at least to your thoughts. Because if they don't, if you've truly moved on, then what does that say about the power they once believed they had? This is the part most people don't see. The sudden reappearance isn't an act of love. It's an act of desperation. It's not about wanting to be close. It's about wanting to be in control again. Because the moment you took your power back, the dynamics shifted. The strings they used to pull no longer work. The buttons they used to press no longer trigger a reaction. And that's unsettling. But here's where it gets interesting. If the subtle tests don't work, if the casual check-ins don't break you, the tactics escalate. Maybe now it's a more emotional message, something dramatic, something that forces you to question whether walking away was the right choice. Or maybe it's silence, the sudden act of disappearing again, hoping you will be the one to break first. Because here's the thing about people who fear losing control. They don't always chase in a straight line. Sometimes they create distance just to see if you'll close the gap for them. And this is the ultimate trap, because the moment you engage, even if it's just to get closure, even if it's just to prove you're over it, even if it's just to satisfy your own curiosity, you've already lost. Not because you still care, but because you've given them what they wanted, confirmation. Confirmation that they still affect you, that they still live somewhere in your thoughts, that they still matter enough for you to react. And once they have that confirmation, the panic fades, the urgency disappears, the game resets. So now the real question is, what happens if you don't play? What happens if you refuse to give them the reaction they're looking for? What happens when their attempts to regain control are met with silence? That's when you see the truth. Because people who truly care don't need to manipulate, don't need to test, don't need to create chaos just to feel secure. And once you recognize that, once you see it for what it truly is, you're no longer in the game at all. You were certain. You made the decision, walked away, and promised yourself you wouldn't look back. You told yourself you were done questioning, done overanalyzing, done giving energy to something that left you drained. But then, something shifts. A message appears, a small gesture. A name you haven't heard in a while suddenly pops up on your screen, and for a split second your mind races. Not because you want to go back, not because you don't remember why you left, but because now there's uncertainty. Why now? What does this mean? Do they miss me? And just like that, curiosity takes hold. Curiosity is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. It drives people to explore the unknown, to seek answers, to dig deeper into things that may not even serve them. It's why people rewatch old movies looking for hidden meanings. It's why unsolved mysteries haunt us for years. And in relationships, especially ones that ended in confusion, curiosity is what keeps doors cracked open long after they should have been slammed shut. Curiosity is what ends up having you go to war and you killing someone. The mind craves closure. It wants answers, explanations, validation. And when those things are left unresolved, the question mark lingers. But here's the truth that most people don't want to admit. Sometimes there is no answer. Sometimes the reason someone reaches out after silence isn't because they've had a grand realization or because they're ready to make things right. Sometimes it's just as simple as they don't know either. Uncertainty is uncomfortable, it makes people restless, it creates a void that the mind desperately wants to fill, and that's why people test the waters. Not necessarily because they want to rebuild something, but because they can't stand not knowing where they stand with you. Are you still thinking about them? Have you moved on? Are you waiting or are you gone for good? And if they don't have a clear answer, the easiest way to get one is to shake the table and see what happens. Maybe it's a harmless "how have you been?" Maybe it's a reaction to a post, a subtle reminder that they're still paying attention. Or maybe it's something more cryptic, just vague enough to make you question. But the intent is the same, to trigger curiosity in you, to make you start wondering, to pull you into the same uncertainty they feel. And once that door is open, it's hard to close again. Because let's be honest, when curiosity takes hold, logic takes a back seat. You start analyzing every word, every pause, every little detail, looking for hidden meaning. You tell yourself you're just being rational, just considering all angles, but in reality, you're spiraling. You're feeding a question that doesn't need to be answered, because deep down, you already know the truth. If someone truly cared, truly wanted to make amends, they wouldn't leave you deciphering breadcrumbs. They wouldn't be playing guessing games. So why do they do it? Why reach out if there's no real intention behind it? The answer is simple: control. Not necessarily in a malicious way, but in a way that soothes their own discomfort. Because the moment you respond, even if it's just to satisfy your own curiosity, you give them something they were missing: clarity. They know they still affect you. They know they still have space in your thoughts. And once they have that confirmation, the uncertainty they felt disappears. But now, you're the one left wondering. It's a cycle, one that repeats over and over, because curiosity is a loop that never really ends. Every answer leads to another question, every interaction opens another door, and before you know it, you're back in a space you swore you had outgrown, chasing closure that was never meant to be given. But here's where things shift. The moment you recognize this pattern, the moment you see it for what it truly is, you realize something. You don't have to play along. You don't have to answer every question your mind throws at you. You don't have to engage just because uncertainty is uncomfortable. Because true closure, true peace, doesn't come from finding the right answer. It comes from accepting that some things don't need answers at all. The emotional reattachment trap is a psychological phenomenon many people unknowingly fall into after a breakup, trauma, or any form of emotional upheaval. At first glance, it feels like a desperate attempt to hold on to what was lost, but it is far more dangerous than it seems. Imagine for a moment that you're walking through a fog, your steps unsure, your heart heavy, and your mind confused. You try to reach for the light, the relief, but with every step, you only move deeper into the fog. That's the trap. Emotional reattachment is the fog that keeps you from breaking free. This is the first act of the story, the moment when the pain feels unbearable and the desire to go back to what you once had seems like the only solution. In the beginning, it's easy to confuse longing with love. After the storm of an emotional crisis, your brain begins to look for the safety of the familiar. That ex, the old patterns, they start to seem like your lifeline. You begin to romanticize what once was, ignoring the toxic parts and only remembering the good times. It's natural, right? You want comfort. You want to feel safe again. But here's the catch. By revisiting these past emotions, you're not healing, you're rewiring yourself to stay stuck in a cycle of pain and false hope. This pattern, this trap, pulls you in with deceptive ease, whispering that everything will be better if you just go back to the beginning. But is it really the beginning, or is it just a rerun of the same unhealthy script? Now, let's talk about what happens when you're deep in this emotional reattachment. It's like you're stuck in a hamster wheel, exhausted, desperate to escape, but too afraid to stop spinning. The fear of loneliness creeps in. You feel the panic rise in your chest. What if this is the best it ever gets, you think? The clock is ticking, and every moment that passes without resolution seems like a personal failure. But you're not failing. You're trapped. The emotional reattachment trap thrives on this fear, this anxiety. It feeds on your insecurities and your need for validation. The longer you stay attached to what no longer serves you, the more of your energy you give away. Can you feel the weight of that? Can you hear the ticking of the clock? Here's where it gets even more interesting. We've all heard the phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? It sounds great, doesn't it? But here's the twist. Sometimes what doesn't kill you just keeps you stagnant. In fact, emotional reattachment can hold you hostage, keeping you from the growth and transformation you deserve. Think about it. Each moment spent longing for the past is a moment taken away from building a better future. But breaking free from the trap isn't as simple as snapping your fingers. It requires a mental shift, a reprogramming of how you view your emotions and your life's direction. The urgency to change, to break free, to finally take control. It all hinges on your willingness to stop holding on to what no longer fits. Are you ready to stop holding on to the past? Are you willing to feel the discomfort of letting go? You see, the true power lies not in the reattachment, but in the detachment. When you let go, you make space for something greater to enter your life. And here's the best part. Every moment you hesitate, every moment you consider going back, is a moment you lose in creating the life you're meant for. What's holding you back? Your fear of the unknown, fear of the journey ahead, or is it just the comfort of what's familiar, even if it's holding you hostage? It's a tough pill to swallow, but the sooner you realize the trap, the sooner you can start breaking free. You're not stuck. You never were. It's time to stop looking back, stop searching for validation from old wounds. Instead, look forward, look up, and realize that your future holds far more than the past ever could. The emotional reattachment trap is a choice, and the choice is yours to make.